So yesterday I did release my team of the tournament for the Rugby Championship, and today I've got a little bit of a different video with the same concept, and it is my Springboks Best 15 of the Rugby Championship. Now, of course, we saw quite a bit of rotation from Rassie Erasmus throughout the competition, but a lot of players have stepped up. So in this one, it is going to be who I feel has been the strongest player for every individual position in the starting lineup within that Springbok camp. But starting with the front row, number 1, Oxnard, I feel like there is absolutely no way that can be argued. Yes, Gerhard Stennekamp had a few good moments throughout this Rugby Championship, but it is always clear when Oxnard makes his way onto the field, you're going to see impact, you're going to see insane scrums, and he's just one of the best props in World Rugby today. It can hardly be debated. The man is that good. So here's my number 1. Number 2, this is where I've gone with Malcolm Marx. Now, he had 4 tries throughout this Rugby Championship, but then I would still argue that we haven't seen the best version of Malcolm Marx throughout this competition. Ever since his injury in that Rugby World Cup, I feel like he has been easing back into it, and he hasn't quite found that same form that he had prior to that. Because before that Rugby World Cup, anytime he made his way off the bench, he got a rolling maul try, and he got 1 or 2 turnovers. And like we've seen here, 4 tries, very impressive for Malcolm Marx, but I feel like there are still better things to come for that man. And it does sound insane to say that, but when we've seen what he's been able to do in the past, it's also, I think, a little bit reasonable that we could see another level from Malcolm Marx moving forward. But Bongiel Mbonambi more than likely will be the starting option a majority of the time for the Springboks. It's only really when they go with that experimental side that we see Malcolm Marx in the starting 15, but he's still my player at number 2, who I feel did the best. Number 3, this is where I've gone Frans Malherbe. When you've got Oxnard on one side and Frans Malherbe on the other, if the scrum does not cause the opposition to crumble, something's gone drastically wrong, because those two are mammoths when it comes to the scrum game. Frans Malherbe, he's an absolute tank, and he's definitely the best 3 for the Springboks. But now we move on to the locking duo. Now this for me is relatively straightforward. Number 4, Eben Etzebeth. Number 5, Rohan Nokia. Now Nokia got some really good minutes at number 5 throughout this Rugby Championship competition. We did see up against the Australians, Pieter-Steph du Toit given a bit of a crack in that locking duo. But in terms of lineouts won throughout the competition, Rohan Nokia having 32 in total, which was much more than any other player. Eben Etzebeth, who is now the most capped Springbok of all time. He's brilliant when it comes to the lineout steals, physicality personified out there on the field. The only other option they've gone with in that number 4 jersey, with of course the exception of Pieter-Steph du Toit, we've got to remember that man has been extremely versatile throughout the Rugby Championship. It was Salman Moura, and I'll be honest, there is a big difference at the moment between Etzebeth and Moura. Moura getting more captaincy minutes under his belt throughout this Rugby Championship, and possibly still has his best games ahead of him. Etzebeth, though, week in, week out, gives you 110%, and it's just the type of experience and type of player that money just can't buy you. He's got the passion, he's got the skill, the ability to do great things, and I look forward to seeing him bring up the 150 caps very soon. But moving on to the loose forward trio now. Number 6, it's got to be the captain, Siya Kolisi. We saw Marco van Staden get a couple chances at 6, and during that time, he got himself a few turnovers, but also defensively at times missing very crucial tackles. Siya Kolisi, he's the type of player that when he makes his way out onto the field, you know he's going to leave everything out there. We saw up against the All Blacks, he did suffer that injury to his face, and that seemed like it was going to be the end of his Rugby Championship, but somehow that man not only came back and played the last game up against Argentina, but he also flew to Argentina for the game the week prior, went into the coach's box. The man is an absolutely brilliant player on and off the field. So Siya Kolisi, he is definitely my number 6. In the 7 jersey, is it even debatable? I don't think so. Pieter-Steph du Toit, Ben Jason Dixon getting some chances throughout this Rugby Championship, and to his credit, one of the games up against Australia, I thought he was really good in. But unfortunately for Ben Jason Dixon, every other game that he's had, he hasn't really made the most of that opportunity. Whereas when you've got someone like Pieter-Steph du Toit, who I don't even think it's debatable at the moment in terms of he is the best forward in World Rugby. Yes, there are some great options, and you could argue Oxenishare in terms of what he does in his position is extremely strong as well. But in terms of those loose forwards, and Pieter-Steph du Toit, his tackling numbers, his running meters, his all-round game is just absolutely extraordinary. So he's my number 7. 3 tries scored throughout this Rugby Championship, throwing himself at the line and always making sure that the Springboks are on the front foot when he is on the field. Number 8, this is where I've gone Jesper Wiese. Now, he is pretty similar to Pieter-Steph du Toit in a couple of the ways that he plays. And one of those ways that I mentioned just before is throwing caution to the wind and just throwing your body at the defensive line. Throughout the Rugby Championship, Jesper Wiese made 183 metres. He beat 9 defenders, he had 46 carries, and he didn't even play in the first 2 matches because he was still suspended from the Gallagher Premiership season. So if you imagine 2 more games with Jesper Wiese starting at 8, it would have been absolutely massive on the statistics. Eldrick Lowe by no means had a bad Rugby Championship. He had a couple solid games up against the Australians, and he's actually been a really good impact player coming off the bench for the Springboks. But Jesper Wiese, in terms of who has been the best number 8, I have to say it is definitely the big man at number 8. But now moving on to 9. This is a little bit tricky, and I have gone Kobus Reinach. Now, I did go with him in my team of the tournament, and some people did disagree. They felt like Cortez Aratama had been the better option overall. It was also mentioned in the comments that maybe I didn't pick the right Springbok halfback for the team of the tournament. And of course, the other 2 options would have been either Jaden Hendrickse or Grant Williams. Now, sadly, Grant Williams did get that injury early on in the Rugby Championship, because if he didn't have that injury, I honestly think he would have been the best 9 of the whole competition, because the impact that he normally brings off the bench is so substantial when it comes to speeding up the Springboks game and helping the play flow. So if he hadn't been injured, I think he 100% would have been that number 9. Hendrickse, he had a really strong game up against Argentina in the second match. In terms of starting minutes throughout the rest of the competition, he hasn't been given a huge amount of them. But also, we've got to remember, heading into this competition, he hadn't really had too many minutes prior to that for the Springboks. Didn't play in the July internationals, where they did have Faf de Klerk originally alongside Morne van den Berg, Grant Williams, and Kobus Reinach. So I do think that Jaden Hendrickse still has plenty more in him, and I think he's going to be really solid throughout the November internationals. Kobus Reinach, he had a solid tournament. I still feel like there were moments where we could have seen a bit better from him, but that's a great sign, because for the Springboks, even when certain players have only been playing at 6 or 7 out of 10s and you're still winning big games, that is a massive confidence booster, not just for the team, but also for the man selecting them, Rassie Erasmus. But now number 10, this is where it also is tricky. I've gone Sasha Feinberg, Ngome Zulu. Now, some may debate that Handré Pollard was the strongest Springbok fly half throughout the Rugby Championship, coming off the bench on quite a few occasions and stepping up to the tee, getting those kicks over, and overall having some really solid matches throughout this competition. But Sasha Feinberg, Ngome Zulu, a little bit similar to Grant Williams. If he had had a longer competition without his injury, I think he would have been a lot more solidified as my number 10, but already without those extra games, I've still got him there as the fly half. 153 metres carried from his 19 carries, 11 defenders beaten, 2 clean breaks, and also scored quite a few points for the Springboks throughout this Rugby Championship. One of the massive criticisms that Manie Libbok has got is when it comes to that kicking tee. Handré Pollard, he doesn't get that same criticism, although, to be fair, throughout this Rugby Championship, he actually has missed a few more kicks than we are used to seeing. Sasha, with the exception of a couple, was extremely consistent off the kicking tee, and it's something that maybe in the future they will consider in terms of how they can have Sasha Feinberg and Ngome Zulu in the starting lineup alongside Manie Libbok. Is it a possibility, or is it just a bit of wishful thinking? But nonetheless, we move on to the centre pairing now. No surprises whatsoever in either of these jerseys. Number 12, Damien de Allende, and number 13, Jesse Kriel. Now, Kriel played every single game in the starting lineup for this Rugby Championship. Damien de Allende only getting the 4 matches. The other 2, they did go with Lukhanyoan, but throughout his 4 games, Damien de Allende, he had 133 metres carried. Now, that is a stat that maybe doesn't represent how hard some of the carries were for Damian de Allende. When he gets his hands on the ball, he is one of the best, if not the best 12 when it comes to making meters when you've already been tackled. Those post-contact numbers are unbelievable for him. He also had 9 defenders beaten, 3 clean breaks, only making the 26 tackles, but also alongside that having 4 turnovers won, including a couple crucial ones up against the All Blacks. And when a game is being decided by less than 7 points, those little moments where you can get that ball back and win a penalty can be absolutely crucial. So Damian de Allende, he is my number 12 for the Boks. Lukhanyo having some decent moments, and it is quite crazy to think that only a year or so ago, Lukhanyo was a guarantee in the starting lineup, and now after that injury and trying to earn himself more minutes, he finds himself as the second string centre, which when you have a player like Lukhanyo, just let that sink in. Lukhanyo, a man who was nominated for Rugby Player of the Year, is now considered the second option. It just tells you how much depth the Springboks have and also how strong this midfield combination is. But Jesse Kriel, he had 8 clean breaks, the most out of any player throughout the Rugby Championship, also making 261 metres. He was scoring tries, he was looking strong while doing it, and that midfield pairing, as long as it is together, the Springboks will of course be having some success. But moving on to the back three, number 11, this is where I've gone with Kurtley Arendse. Now, he had as much better performances from that number 11 jersey than the games that he played at 14. Makazole Mapimpi, I don't think did too much wrong throughout the games that he played, but unfortunately, he just didn't really get too many chances throughout the Rugby Championship. Kurtley Arendse, though, he scored himself 2 tries, he had 222 metres carried, 10 defenders beaten, and 7 clean breaks. He's had some really standout games, but then one of the other performances that we saw from Kurtley Arendse, he had 2 metres carried, and that was pretty much it. So it just shows, depending on what the tactic is from the Springbok and which wing they're going to be passing out to the most, when you got Cheslin Kolbe out on the other wing calling for the ball, he's probably going to receive it quite a bit. But Kurtley Arendse, when he gets his hands on the ball and has a little bit of space, can still create a lot of magic. Number 14, I've given it away. It's Cheslin Kolbe. 6 clean breaks throughout this competition, 21 defenders beaten, the most of any player throughout the Rugby Championship. He had 239 metres carried, and his step is still absolutely lethal. We saw it up against Argentina, the way he's able to manipulate the defence so that he goes straight through the gap and scores tries. He's a powerful ball runner, even though the size doesn't match the strength, but he sat down Scott Barrett earlier on in the competition, and he sat down many big men throughout his rugby career. So, Cheslin Kolbe, he is my number 14, and then number 15. It's only really a one-horse race here, mainly because we've hardly seen Willie le Roux throughout this Rugby Championship, only throughout the early stages of the comp. I've gone with Apalele Fasi. 4 tries, 5 clean breaks, and 292 metres carried for the Springboks. He is extremely safe under the high ball. I've seen his defence be criticised a little bit throughout this competition, but overall, as a young player, he is still learning, he's still getting better, and that is a scary sight for a lot of opposition teams, because if he is already this good early on in his rugby career, what's he going to be like in 2 or 3 more years? Definitely under Rassie Erasmus, who seems to be able to bring out the best in certain players. And it's quite cool to see Apalele Fasi doing well, because we've got to remember, he was a player that most people didn't want to see in the Springbok kit, and anytime he got selected, it used to be that people were disappointed, and the whole way through, Rassie Erasmus has said, I'm backing Apalele Fasi because he is an extremely strong player and he's going to have a future for the Springboks. So the fact that Rassie was willing to give him that chance early, where not many people were willing to give him that same shot, I feel like that's something that Apalele Fasi will remember, he'll appreciate, and he will always try his best when he's wearing the green and gold. But that is the starting 15, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm not going to be doing the reserves, but I have got the honourable mentions. And that is my honourable mention of the best forward off the bench. Probably not going to be a surprise who that one goes to. And then the best back off the bench as well. So for the best forward, a lot of people will know exactly who I am talking about here, Kwagga Smith. Now, in the back end of the Rugby Championship, maybe we didn't see as much of an impact from that man, and that is crazy to say, because normally when he makes his way onto the field, you know straight away. He's an absolute athlete. He will get turnovers. He's scored a couple tries throughout this Rugby Championship, so forever evolving his game, coming off the bench. Still, I believe the best impact player off a reserves bench in World Rugby today, so Kwagga Smith does get that honourable mention. And then in terms of the backs, this is actually where I've gone with Handré Pollard. Once again, if Grant Williams had played more of the competition, I would have given him that role, but because he was injured early, meant that Handré Pollard, just a really safe option coming off the bench. And we've got to remember, a lot of the time, he was the only back replacement, with the exception of Grant Williams, who was playing as halfback. Yes, Williams has the versatility to play out on the wing, but we didn't really see him used in that manner throughout this Rugby Championship. So the fact that Pollard knew anytime he made his way onto the field, that was it. There was no one else. They could not afford an injury, and every single time Pollard made his way on, it just seemed like there was a calmness go over that Springbok backline. And in fact, the whole team, because he's got that experience, because he's got that kick and boot to match, and he's a fantastic player. And this Rugby Championship has been an interesting one for him, because we've seen Sasha Feinberg Ngome Zulu actually become a lot of people's starting 10. I like the intensity though. From Handré Pollard when he made his way off the bench in the second game up against Argentina. He looked angry, and I wonder whether or not that is something to do with Mani Libbok starting the game and Sasha starting the earlier contests of the Rugby Championship. Perhaps Pollard's found that little bit of an extra fire under him, and he's going, listen here, I'm the experienced guy. I'm that guy who's going to keep that number 10 jersey, have those youngsters making their way off the bench. But yeah, I would have Pollard as my best replacement back for the Springboks and my best replacement forward of Kwagga Smith. But do let me know, ladies and gentlemen, who would you change in this side? Now, I should clarify, this is not what I feel they will be going with throughout the November internationals. We will actually have a prediction a little bit closer to the start of those games, but I'm looking forward to seeing Rassie Erasmus announce the Springbok squad for those November matches and seeing if all of these players, with the exception of a couple injuries, will get themselves the chance to play. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all for the next one.